You felt all of these today. The weird quiet you get sitting inside while rain hammers the windows. The pull toward an old photo from a decade before you were born. That moment in traffic when you glance at the car next to you and your brain short circuits for a second. You've felt every single one of these feelings. You just didn't have a word for them. There are 10 emotions on this list that most people feel regularly and almost nobody can name. By the time this video ends, you'll have names for all of them, and you will never be able to unfeel them. The first feeling is called Hiraeth. You probably know what nostalgia feels like. That warm, slightly aching pull towards something in the past. But there's a version of it that goes further, where you're not just missing a time, you're missing a place, or a version of a life or a feeling that simply doesn't exist anymore. And the unbearable part is that even if the place still exists, the thing you're actually missing doesn't. You can go back. You can stand in the exact same street and walk through the exact same door. And it won't be the same, because the version of it you're missing only ever lived in a particular window of time that has since closed. In Welsh, this is called Hiraeth. Welsh speakers will tell you it genuinely doesn't translate into English. Not because they're being dramatic, but because there is no English word for it. It's a longing for a home you can't return to, or possibly one that never existed quite the way you remember it. People feel it for their childhood neighborhood after the old neighbors have moved on, for the early days of a relationship, for a summer that felt at the time like it would never end. There's real grief in it. Even though nothing bad happened, things just moved, and somewhere in that movement what you were missing was left behind. Chrysalism. Rain outside, loud enough to hear through the walls, bad enough that leaving would be genuinely miserable. And you're inside, warm, dry, nowhere to be for a while. Something in you relaxes in a very specific way. It's not just that the weather is bad, it's that the outside world has become temporarily unreachable. Every demand that usually exists out there, errands, obligations, the general noise of having to be somewhere, is now physically cut off. The storm did it for you. And in that, there is an almost absurd sense of permission. Permission to stay. Permission to do nothing. Permission to just exist where you are. This is called Chrysalism, named after the chrysalis, the sealed case a caterpillar retreats into before it transforms. It's that specific feeling of being closed off from the world in a way that feels protective rather than trapped. The noise outside is actually part of what makes it work. The sound of the storm is the thing that proves you're inside. Your brain registers the contrast and something in it settles. That's why people crack a window just to hear the rain better. It's not about the rain itself, it's about the wall between you and everything else. Jouska, you're in the shower, and you're winning an argument that happened 3 weeks ago. You finally said the thing you should have said in the moment. The exact right words. The perfect delivery. The response that would have ended it completely. Except you're alone. The water's running, and the other person isn't here and hasn't been for weeks. You're not arguing with them. You're arguing with a version of them your brain constructed and keeps on retainer specifically for this purpose. That's Jouska. A Jouska is a hypothetical conversation your mind rehearses compulsively, an argument you're preparing for, a confession you keep almost making, an explanation you've refined so many times it barely resembles what actually happened. Your brain runs it on a loop not because it expects the conversation to happen, but because it can't file the situation away until it feels resolved. And since the real conversation either went wrong or never happened, it keeps the simulation running. It shows up everywhere once you notice it. The drive home after a bad meeting, running through what you should have said to your manager. The lying in bed at 2 a.m. version of a conversation with someone you miss. The version of yourself that finally explains calmly and clearly exactly why you were right. The strange part is how real it feels while it's happening. Your body responds to it. Your heart rate changes. You feel the satisfaction of landing a point against a person who isn't in the room and never will be. Your brain is very bad at telling the difference between a thing that happened and a thing you rehearsed enough times. Next up is Kenopsia. There's something specifically unsettling about a place that was built for people when the people are gone. A school hallway in the middle of summer. An office floor on a Sunday evening. Chairs pushed in, screens dark. A coffee mug someone forgot. A stadium an hour after the final whistle. Food wrappers still on the ground. Lights still buzzing overhead. These places were designed around the assumption that people would be in them. Every chair, every sign, every square foot of floor plan assumes a crowd. And when the crowd is gone, something feels wrong in a way that's hard to pin down. Kenopsia is the word for it. The eerie, slightly off feeling of a place that used to be full and now isn't. What makes it distinct from just being in an empty room is the presence of the absence. If you'd never known the space was full, it would just be a room. But because the room was built for something it's no longer doing, The emptiness has a texture. People feel versions of this looking at old social media profiles that haven't been touched in years. The structure is still there. The person who filled it isn't. The gap is what you're feeling. Next up is ellipsism. You are not going to see how this ends. Not the big things. What the world looks like in 100 years, whether the problems that feel permanent right now actually get solved. What humans figure out next. But also the smaller things. The kid you know who is 7 years old right now and is going to become someone interesting. The city you live in and what it turns into. The story that's currently in its early chapters. You'll be gone before most of it resolves. And on some level, you already know this. You just don't sit with it very often. Ellipsism is the quiet sadness of knowing you'll never see how things turn out. It's not the same as being afraid of death. It's more specific than that. It's about the narrative. Humans are wired to want to know what happens next. Every story you've ever followed, every series you watched, every book you finished, your brain is built around the pull of resolution. And then at some point, it registers that the largest story you're inside of just keeps going after your part ends. No resolution, no final chapter. Just continuation without you. It tends to arrive in quiet moments. Looking at a skyline at night and doing the math on how different it will look in 50 years. Watching a child who is too young to remember this moment. Reading about something that won't fully unfold for decades. There's no fixing it. The story doesn't pause. It just keeps moving the way it always has. The way it will long after the last person who remembers you is also gone. The next feeling is called Vellichor. Walk into a used bookshop, and it hits you within about 10 seconds. It's not just the smell, though that's part of it. It's something about the objects themselves. Every book on those shelves has already had a life before it landed here. Someone bought it, maybe read it in a single weekend, maybe barely cracked the spine, left a grocery receipt inside as a bookmark, underlined a sentence that meant something to them at the time, and then for whatever reason, a move, a clear out, a change in what they needed, they let it go. And now it's here. Vellichor is the name for that feeling. The quiet, slightly melancholy atmosphere of used bookshops and secondhand stores. Places that are full of objects that used to be part of someone's life and aren't anymore. It's not a heavy feeling. It's more like a soft awareness that time passes, things move on, and the world is full of small histories you could spend a lifetime discovering. Every object on those shelves is evidence of a person you'll never meet, making a choice you'll never know the reason for. The next feeling is called Anemoia. You find a box of photographs from the 1970s that belong to someone else's family, or you stumble across footage of an ordinary city street from 50 years ago. People walking, signs in shop windows, cars that look like props now, and you feel a pull toward it, a longing for that time, that pace, that particular quality of light, which makes no sense. You weren't there. You have no memories from that decade. There's no logical reason to miss something you never had. And yet the feeling is real. It's called Anemoia. Nostalgia for a time before your own. The reason it happens is straightforward once you see it. Old media only preserved the good moments. The photographs that survived were the ones worth keeping. The footage that got recorded was celebrations, ordinary days that felt worth saving. What you're looking at is a highlight reel, filtered through an aesthetic that now reads as warm and familiar. You're not actually missing the 1970s. You're projecting a feeling of simplicity onto the most convenient surface available. The past just happens to be a perfect screen for that. It can't push back. The next feeling is called Sonder. Picture a traffic jam. You're in it. You glance left and there's a stranger in the next car, tapping their fingers on the wheel, staring straight ahead, completely somewhere else in their own head. And then it hits you. That person has an entire life happening. A childhood, a specific fear they've never told anyone, an argument they've been replaying in their head all week, a favorite song, people they love. A whole story, just as long and detailed and complicated as yours. And you're going to drive away in 30 seconds and never know a single thing about any of it. That feeling has a name. It's called Sonder. Sonder is the moment you realize that every single person around you is the main character of a life you will never see. It sounds obvious when you put it into words. Of course, other people have inner lives, but actually feeling it, really registering it in your chest for a second, is something completely different from knowing it intellectually. It tends to hit in crowds, train stations, airports, busy streets. Your brain tries to actually hold the weight of it, every face, a whole person, and then quietly gives up because the scale is too much. It's not quite good, and it's not quite bad. It's just enormous. The next feeling is called Occhiolism. Pull up a map of Earth from space right now and find yourself on it. You can't, not really. You can find your country, your city, maybe your neighborhood if you zoom in far enough. But you, the specific person reading this with everything currently going on in your life, are invisible. A rounding error on a planet that is itself a rounding error in a solar system, that is itself unremarkable in a galaxy containing about 400 billion other stars, in a universe containing about 2 trillion other galaxies. Occhiolism is the awareness of how small your experience is compared to the actual scale of everything. Not as an abstract fact you already knew, but as something you actually feel for a second. The floor briefly becomes transparent. The sudden sense that the walls of your life are much thinner than they normally appear. And yet the thing you said at work on Thursday is still taking up space in your head. It tends to arrive uninvited, staring at a night sky long enough that the scale starts to register, standing on a rooftop looking out over a city and doing the math on how many separate lives are happening inside those lit windows right now. Reading a number so large it stops meaning anything and briefly meaning everything instead. The strange thing is it cuts both ways. Some people find it unbearable. If nothing matters at this scale, what's the point of any of it? Other people find it quietly relieving. If nothing matters at this scale, the thing you've been carrying all week is allowed to be smaller than it feels. Most people find it both, depending on the day. It shows up and then it leaves. You go back to your life, your Thursday, your specific and invisible set of problems. The scale retreats. The walls thicken again. And everything that felt small for a moment goes back to feeling exactly as large as it did before. The last feeling on our list is Monachopsis. You're at a gathering, work event, party, some social occasion where the conversation is flowing and everyone seems at ease. And you're participating. You're smiling, responding, holding up your end. Nothing is technically wrong. But underneath all of it, there's this quiet, persistent sense that you don't quite fit. Not that you're unwelcome. More like a piece that almost matches the puzzle it's been placed in, but not quite. There's a frequency to the room, and yours is slightly off. And no amount of warming up or relaxing, or getting a few drinks in seems to fully close the gap. Monachopsis is the subtle, persistent feeling of being out of place. What makes it different from shyness, which fades as you settle in, is that Monachopsis doesn't really respond to comfort. You can be completely comfortable and still feel it. The mismatch isn't between you and the situation. It seems to be between you and something harder to name than that. People who feel it regularly tend to carry a quiet belief underneath everything, that somewhere there is a room they'd walk into and it would just work, where fitting in wouldn't require any effort at all. Most of us spend a significant portion of our lives looking for that room without ever quite saying so out loud. That's the list. 10 feelings you have probably had, some of them today, that you didn't have names for until right now. The strange thing about naming a feeling is what it does to the feeling. It doesn't make it go away, but it does make it slightly less like something is wrong with you and slightly more like something is just true about being a person. You already knew all of these. You just didn't know you knew them.